it doesn't matter. It's your timeline, and you have to honor that, and you have to show grace for that. But you have to be in it for a lifetime. If you really want a fun life, you live a fun life. You live a high level life, right? Like, you don't wait for this goal and that goal to come true.
Hello, wonderful humans, and welcome to yet another episode of the Meaningful Conversations podcast. Today's episode is going to speak to anyone who is trying to identify and figure out what their career path will look like. Because my guest today, Prasha Dutra, is an incredible woman who is helping people identify that for themselves. Prasha is a women in STEM coach, TEDx speaker, and a die-hard Friends fan. Prasha helps women in STEM believe in themselves so that they can take their next steps with confidence. With over 15 years of being in the STEM ecosystem, Prasha brings expertise, step-by-step growth techniques, and a fresh perspective to the table for her community and coaching clients, spanning from finding clarity in their careers to finding time for their families and dreams and getting connected with relatable role models. I can't wait for you to listen to our conversation with Prasha. Let's get to it. Hi, Prasha. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Masha. This is so exciting.
Thank you so much for being here. And this is a re-recording for everyone who doesn't know. Like, the file got corrupted, so we're redoing this interview. And I'm so excited because the information that you shared last time was incredible, and I'm very excited to share it out to
Yeah.
the world. Finally, technology, please let us do that. So let's dive into the first question. And basically, I want to talk to you about your recent transition going full time on your business, leaving the job that you loved so much. You told me all about it during a different call that we were on, and you told me about the conflict, the internal conflict that you had, whether to choose one or the other, etc. Talk us through that experience and that difficult decision that you ultimately had to make. How did you approach it, and why did you ultimately make it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I loved corporate. I loved engineering. I always wanted to be an engineer. So I worked, and I also worked in a factory, which was a definitely a childhood dream of mine. So every day I walked into work, I was extremely grateful, extremely excited, and extremely always looking forward to that part of my life. And so it was kind of an interesting change for me. But what led to that was a lot more spiritual alignment, a lot more alignment with what I really want. Where do I want to go in life? A little bit more of a longer term perspective. I could see the path that the corporate life would have led to. Like, I could see all the milestones, how you can sometimes, like, you can see the whole path. You're like, okay, I see where this is going.
Mhm.
And this other path is also going somewhere. However, I don't see it yet, but I'm curious as to where this would lead. Plus, the promise it has is so much more bigger than what I might have had in mind before. So I think it was more of the curiosity to move into this unknown territory and unknown path, but also more of a spiritual calling. So Oprah Winfrey says, like, my job ended and my calling began. For me, that was really the big thing. Like, okay, like, it's time to end the profession and, like, finally focus on the calling.
You're giving me goosebumps just thinking about that, because it is just so moving when you do find that calling, when you feel that it's right on that spiritual level as well as rational level.
Yeah.
So now both of us find ourselves in this new territory of being in STEM but not necessarily doing technical STEM things every day. So what are your thoughts on these hybrid roles that aren't technical per se, but are still involved with it? Where do they fit into this STEM ecosystem, and what impact are they having on the ecosystem?
First, I think just calling it an ecosystem probably defines it really well. That we can't have just technologists or scientists or engineers. There's so much support that comes for it, like, to keep that ecosystem together, right? Like, so they may not be like main participants, but we still, STEM companies still need HR, accounting, like, everything has to come together for it to function like a well-oiled machine. So definitely, I think we are on the sort of the peripheries of it. Like, we're kind of trying to do work that will eventually support STEM ecosystems. So we may not be doing very direct work, but definitely very, very important work, especially especially if you think about gender gap, when you think about more women in STEM. So I think eventually the industry is very desperate now that they need more women in STEM. So I think our work is more important, is going to be more and more important as the society changes. It's whatever its norms are. It's going to be, again, more and more important with time, and that's kind of where we fit. But also I think we are building enterprises in STEM, right, in some way, shape, or form, whether you come up with a new technology to coach people, or whether you come up with a new developing course that can help leaders become better STEM leaders, or whatever you do in the future. We're building those enterprises that then can have this strong foundation of diversity and inclusion. And then, of course, the future in 20, 40, 50 years, hopefully these enterprises become so big that now they're writing the rules, and now we have closed the gender gap because we created our own enterprises, we created our own solutions in STEM, and in supporting that STEM ecosystem. So it can look really exciting, it can be very fun. And so I think what we're doing is an incredibly important work, and somebody has to do it. So right, otherwise, if we just depend on the organizations, they've kind of failed us time and again. So it's going to take all hands on deck, and whatever our superpower is, right? Like, that's kind of why I left too, was like I was doing well there, but it wasn't my superpower. Like, it was really, I
Mm.
was really good at it, but it wasn't something I was put on this planet to do, right? Like, I wasn't put on this planet to do that. Some people are really put on this planet to do that work, but I had to really find what I was put on this planet to do, and then sharing that gifts eventually will help everybody. But yes, the STEM ecosystem would benefit from this kind of work as well, I think.
Absolutely. I love that. Very, very powerful. And speaking of the future, what do you think the future of the jobs in STEM will look like? Will we have more of these fluid and hybrid roles? Or, yeah, what is your outlook on the future of roles in STEM?
It's going to be exciting to see how the big corporations adjust to this new wave of inclusion and new wave of diversity, and how that sort of pans out into the flexible workforce, future of work, all these incredible things that are already reality, right? Where we didn't imagine working from home a year ago, and now it's like such a common thing. That's going to change a lot of things. I think the job market would have to find a way to evolve with this big resignation coming. I'm curious what HR professionals are thinking, like, how do you stop this? I can't see the future, but I truly hope that this change starts a more intentional way of putting jobs out, more intentional opportunities and roles that have a purpose, that have a bigger thing attached to it, because I think the younger population is looking for that. And that's why you see them leaving, because they're saying, why do I need you when I can create change on my own? And so it's going to be, they would have to meet us halfway to make
Mhm.
that happen. So definitely more flexibility, more innovation, more risk taking, because again, this generation is not afraid to risk anything. So the companies have to evolve. Like, they can't operate on these rigid frameworks. Like, I worked in manufacturing and everything was very rigid. It has to change. You have to take chances with people, you have to take chances with technology. You're pushing boundaries. I mean, metaverse, all these things, like blockchain, like, you better get with times. And I hope the roles get with times too, which are more hybrid and intrapreneurial, like where you have
Mhm.
autonomy over the work that you do. You own the results, you own the risks, you own, that is going to hopefully make people want to stay in technology, even stay in regular traditional jobs. And of course, the second part is then people split and create their own STEM organizations, which will be super exciting to see if that happens. And we can finally put an end to this overgrowing capitalism that's really becoming a huge nuisance of like one person having all this power. That would be very exciting. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in our lifetimes, but yeah, if it does, it'll be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed. I couldn't agree more. I just finished listening to Start with Why, the incredible book by Simon Sinek, and I couldn't agree more. Like purpose and that, intrinsic why, intrinsic desire to have an impact on this world, to have more than just a job, more than to be more than just a tool in this mechanism, in this capitalist machine. It's much more motivating, and that's what these younger generations. I feel it inside of me, right? And like that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm sure that's exactly how you feel. And a lot of people who are listening to this right now can resonate with that. They're looking for a job that really moves them. And I really hope that your prediction is right and that this great resignation is just the beginning of that wave, of that storm that is coming.
Yeah, like because again, I think we are that's our message
Mhm.
to them, right? Is that you better get your act together, or this train is not gonna.
Yeah, you're staying on the station. The train is leaving. That's it.
Yeah.
And so, what are your recommendations for women or anyone who is trying to find their place in STEM? You know, we're talking about the ecosystem. So, trying to find their place in STEM, how can they create, how can they craft a career that taps into their full potential and feels right?
Thanks for asking me that, because I think a lot of people are not asking that question enough because they are just following the standards set by their organization or the standards set by their peers, and they're just following blindly on those career paths. So I think it's very important to first understand this, that you have a choice. Like I think a lot of women don't know that. Like having that choice is very important. Remembering it, that you have a choice at all times. You are in control of your career. Like so many people think it's the other way, but it's not. Like you decide what you want, when you want it, how you want it. And when you start asking, then maybe it's a little delayed, but it's going to come because you know what you want. This is what like my work is dedicated on, is to helping women understand that, one, get their power back, to like believe in their brilliance. Like that's kind of like this very big mission that I'm on. Once you do that, then you will find your place because you will show up authentically, you'll show up with confidence. Confidence gap is one of the many reasons why women leave STEM careers. And again, if we can fill that gap, we can give women all the tools they deserve and need, they'll automatically create their own space, they'll create their own roles, they'll be able to do things that they want to do, they'll be able to be very authentic and creative at work. And that's why they're hired. I think the organizations have also forgotten why diversity inclusion is important. You're hiring diverse talent, so you have diverse solutions, but then when people speak up, you say don't speak up, and you're back to square one, so it doesn't work out. So I think once you start with getting that choice back, that you decide what happens, and then believing in your brilliance, and then finally putting it all to action with all that confidence, I think you can create your own incredible career path, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. A lot of people don't understand the fact that they do have a choice, and we're kind of following the default path that we see everybody else following, and we think that's the right way to go about it. And I'm not saying it's the wrong way, but I'm just saying that there are other ways to do it. And if this way doesn't feel right, you don't have to follow it. You just but the hard part is actually sitting down and reflecting what is right for you. And a lot of people don't do that work because they don't know that they should do that work. So, my question for you is, how did you do it for yourself? How did you find this direction, and how long did it take you, and how did you approach it?
So I think first of all, it was definitely getting a coach for me that was really transformational. Before that, also, I was reading a lot of books. In 2018, I read 61 books. My goal was 100. And I read 61. But don't ask me about the comprehension, though, by the way. At that point, all you want is get to the finish line. So I don't think comprehension was important at that time. But I was always obsessed with like improving myself and doing better and like showing up better. So that was obviously, it's more of a core competency of mine. I think always improving, always learning. And then I had really great mentors at work also who told me from very beginning that, they didn't skim on saying you're talented, you're bright, you can do this. They gave me chances, they took risks. And so it was a very great experience of being around those, those individuals who were invested in my growth. But then again, in 2019, I definitely stepped it up a notch by getting a full lifetime life coach, who helped me figure out a lot of things and helped me learn all the things that you're talking about, like journaling and meditation and all these different things where you really start asking big questions like, why am I here? What is the purpose? And then how am I showing up? It's the progression of your life. You have to get the basics first. You have to get your house, that life pyramid or whatever. You have to figure those things out before you actually get to that purpose or get to honing in on like how do you optimize this life that you've built. So if somebody is like 5 steps behind us, don't worry. Like you need that part of your journey to then be able to ask those questions when you're ready. You will know when you're ready. I'm not saying everybody's always ready. Some people have more complicated lives, more complicated things going on. For me, it was a little bit easier in terms of that. I didn't have kids. I didn't have people to take care of. I wasn't a primary caregiver. So I want to be very mindful that people can have different life situations, and this may not never become priority. But I invite people to do simple things, like you can read a book, right? Like you can listen to a podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, you already are doing work. So for me, again, my goals, my career was very, first it was very autopilot, do this, do this, do this. Then it was very intentional for the second half of it. And then of course now I'm retired from engineering forever. It was closed in a very good way also. So I think just basic understanding of where you're at in your journey, and prioritizing the next steps accordingly. Just every day do a little bit better, right? Like just a little bit better. If I could do a little bit better every day, that's it. That ways you'll look back and you'll be like, oh my god, it's so amazing, you come so far. And I think you also asked a little bit about the time, how long it took, but I'm in it for life. So there is, never a thing of like it's 6 months or 3 months or 10 months or 12 months. It's a lifetime commitment to always be better, and to always do better, and to always enjoy whatever comes your way, ups and downs. And that's it. I mean, that's life, right? Like, so there's no timeline. Some people can take an entire lifetime, some people do it very quickly. I know people who are VPs and CEOs at 30. I also know people who don't have anything to their name at 60. So it doesn't matter, it's your timeline, and you have to honor that, and you have to show grace for that. But you have to be in it for lifetime. If you really want a fun life, you live a fun life, you live a high level life, right? Like you don't wait for this goal and that goal to come true.
Yeah, honestly, so much that I want to comment on. First of all, the Maslow pyramid of needs, right? So I think that it's such a privilege to be able to ask yourself this question, because that means that you have the basics covered. You have shelter, you have food, you're not worried about where your next meal is coming from. You have community, you have that support system. And the fact that you're asking yourself that question, that is it's incredible. It's the fact that it means that you are on that level, and getting there, everybody needs to get there somehow, one way or another. And so taking your time and giving yourself grace while you're on that journey, so important. And finally, I remember in the previous episode, the recording that was spoiled, we were talking about purpose as like a bluebird. I still visualize it. We talked about how yes, it's a lifelong pursuit because it always keeps on escaping from you, because it's, first of all, it's so ambitious that you shouldn't like achieve it immediately. But then as you grow and develop, that bird changes and its direction changes. And so you keep on chasing. And that's the fun bit, right? You're always rediscovering what it is for you. You're always looking for new ways on how to achieve it. And I love that you're a lifelong learner, a lifelong pursuer of this passion and of, your truth, essentially. It's wonderful.
Thank you. I think it's always, yeah, because I think people are so attached to the results part. Like it should happen this way or should happen that way. And the fun is not in the result. I mean, I'm sure you bought something that you waited for a very long time, and you bought it and you didn't even care to take it out of the bag because now the fun is gone, right? Like whatever, right? Like you leave it in your drawer and never look at it again because all you wanted was that quick high of like buying it. That's the thing with results. You'll be very disappointed if you tie all your happiness to that result because it's not there. Like the fun is not there, the joy is not there. It's all in the process. You if mountaintops were the joyous places, people would build homes there, right? They don't do that. People just go there, take a picture, come back. Like the summit is the small shortest part of a hike, right? Like it's for a reason, because that's not what it's all about. It's about conquering all those obstacles and getting there, experiencing it, turning around. Like that's it. And then you go to the next mountain. One thing I was reading in this book called The Path Made Clear, I think everybody should have it if they're thinking about purpose and what's next in life. It said when you're on the top of the mountain, and I think John Bon Jovi said it, but when you're on top of the mountain, it's not the happiness to be on top of the mountain. It's about, okay, now one's done, you have to come down and go to the next one. So it's always that way. And I think everybody's so caught up in this pinnacle of success or whatever that is, that they're forgetting that if you're living a well lived life, I hope you climb tons of mountains and have a lot of fun.
That's a very beautiful metaphor, climbing mountains. And as someone who lives in Colorado, I understand that very well.
I hope so.
I always try to ask all of my guests about some of their failures, some of the mistakes that they've made along their paths, because I feel like mistakes teach us so much more than any achievement, any, like peak of the mountain would. So, what have been some of the biggest mistakes that you have made along this journey, and what have you learned from them?
Yeah, I think last time I said no mistakes. And then after that, I was thinking about the question. I'm like, hold on, there was one thing I should have told Masha. But I think the only mistake I would say that we all make way too much is not believing in ourselves. It's just such a weird thing. Like, really underselling ourselves or letting other people define us. I did that for a while, and where other people said you're smart, so I was smart. If other people said I was this, then I was that, and so it was a constant battle, and you're constantly getting away from who you really are. So I definitely think that would be my mistake of like not believing in myself. I could have again accomplished so much more if I did that from day one. But I also realized that's the process, that's the way it unfolds. But other than that, I usually don't think of anything as a mistake. I think everything is an exciting experience. Some are hard, some are not hard. Like some are, a lot of party moments, some are a lot of crying in a pillow and journaling. And so I think we all go through those ups and downs. But mistake wise, my dad used to say this, like, make mistakes. Like, I want you to make mistakes because what your mistakes will teach you, I can't teach you. Like, people can't teach you that. You have to learn it yourself. Like, you have to fall from a bike while going over sand to know that you shouldn't drive over sand, right? Like, it's just how it works. So he would always encourage us that he like, I would be at school every single day if your teacher calls me for a new mistake every single day. Like, that's the only rule. Like, the rule is you can't repeat the same ones again. See, because if you're repeating the same ones, then you're not paying attention, you're not learning, you're wasting all your mistakes. So you can have new mistakes, if you want to call them that. You can have new experiences, whatever you want to call it, but just make sure that you're taking something away from it and not doing that same thing again, right? So I think mistakes can be super powerful, but we are discouraged, in our school systems, we're discouraged from making mistakes. So
Yeah.
we're neural pathways are completely screwed up at this point. So that's why I think people take it very personally, but it's just because of the psychology that has been conditioned for so long
Mhm.
to be like, if I get a red mark, like, that's a bad thing and everything falls apart. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy how the school system, how the educational system does that to us. And also, I feel like, at least in my experience with growing up in Russia,
Mm.
asking questions and not knowing the answers, that has been, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest no-nos that you could have as a child in the school system in Russia, because you should have an answer. You should
Mhm.
not ask questions. So I still struggle sometimes with asking questions where I don't fully understand what's going on.
Mhm.
Professionally and personally. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunately, these behaviors are something that we need to unlearn as adults to live a more fulfilling, meaningful life. And yeah, that thing that your dad said is absolutely beautiful. That's
Thank
wonderful.
you. Yeah, so our parents compensated for the broken school systems.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, actually, my I had a conversation with my dad a couple of years ago, and I was telling him about how it was a mistake that he has made, but I was like, but I wasn't going to learn from it until I made it.
Hmm.
And he said, yeah, the biggest fallacy of our world is that we can learn from other people's mistakes. And I couldn't agree more. Like, no, we got to make a lot of these mistakes ourselves and make our
Absolutely.
own conclusions, because that's the only way we really feel them through. And I agree with you. It can be called mistakes, it can be called experiences. Some people call
Yeah.
them failures. Whatever you want to call it, just learn from it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the future. How are you approaching goal setting for the future? And how do you determine what's your next direction of growth?
Those are deep questions because, in fact, literally all December I've been spending time a lot on vision and energy and all these different things, like what's in the future. And I'm going to be going through a huge change in like how I show up for my business and what it is, because that's kind of the first 5 years of your business is all about that. Like, you reiterate quickly, you're like, okay, not working, not working, not working. So I think for me it's a vision led process. I'm a visual person. I also like to think of myself as sort of a visionary, like because I can see bigger things than a lot of other people. Even when I was in corporate, I could see bigger visions for departments and company and different things like that. Like I'm not afraid of those big visions, and I'm blessed. I think it's a gift also when you can see it. So for me, it's a very vision led process. So I would spend like weekends, I Saturdays are my usually my tech free days. I'm not on phone, I'm not on internet. Those are my days where I'm spending time with family, and then I would journal or meditate for a couple of hours and just try to get that vision out of me and like make sure that everything I'm doing is coming from that place of like vision and intention. And so for me, the next big steps are to align myself with that bigger vision I have for myself, my brand, and my messaging. And again, of course, I mean, in the end, we get into business not to make money, we get into business to make impact, right? So how do you actually increase that impact? How do you add more value to a bigger audience? So there's going to be a little shift for my brand, going a little bit away from STEM and from that core STEM coaching that I've been doing so far, and moving into a more of a education space of like teaching people to believe in themselves and more on the motivational side, which I think is another gift I have. So I want to explore that. Yeah, that's how I'm approaching the future. And the direction of growth comes from ether. You just have to listen. And if you listen intently, you will find out what the universe is trying to tell you or where it's pulling you towards.
That's beautiful. And I can't wait to see what that next chapter will look like for you. So, how can people learn more about it and, follow you and, get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your journey or anything that you're doing?
Yeah, just Instagram is like the place I live at. I have something called, and I'm working hard to bring that back, but a daily hype dance. So if you want a little bit joy in your life and want to see me dancing every morning, also, not the best or most modern dancer in the world, but still I have fun. Just on Instagram, I'm very accessible. My handle is Prasha Dutra, and if you send me a DM, like I'm always available to chat. And now that I do this full time, I definitely have way more time on my hands than I did before. So all the updates, all the changes, everything that's happening is usually Instagram's the first place.
I will leave the links over there in the description and in the description of the episode. So make sure you find Prasha on there because whenever I see your content, it just brings a huge smile on my face and it definitely
Oh,
re energizes me. So I wish that for
thank
everyone.
you.
So please go and follow Prasha.
Thank you very much. That was so sweet.
Prasha, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your light with us, for redoing this episode once again. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to share all of this with the audience. Thank
I
you.
so appreciate you as well. This was so great.
Prasha, thank you so much. You are so incredibly wise. And every time I talk to you, I learn something new. And it's just so fulfilling, so meaningful. Thank you so much for being in my life and for sharing your wisdom with our audience today. Make sure you follow Prasha on Instagram. I will leave an active link in the description of the video or in the podcast description. You can also search for her profile just using the search mechanism. You can find her as Prasha Dutra. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let me know what you thought about today's episode, if any thoughts or anything came up by commenting below underneath this video or, sharing this podcast on social media and tagging us or DMing us on social media or finally responding directly to our newsletters because we are there and we're listening and you're directly going to be in our inboxes by replying. And if you're not on our newsletter yet, make sure you sign up. I will leave a link to it in the description as well because we are sharing nuggets of wisdom every single week. We have gone through a revamp of our newsletter recently and I'm very excited about what it looks like. So I'm super curious to see what you think about it. We've had a lot of very positive feedback and people are finding it incredibly useful. And I could see the open rates also increasing because of that. Like this episode on YouTube and share this episode with your friends, with someone who you think will benefit from this information. Let's spread Prasha's wisdom and help people figure out what they want to do, how they want to do it, etc. for themselves. Have a wonderful time of the day you're currently experiencing. Bye.